Hello, and welcome to the May 2017 Gaming PC Builds of the Month, brought to you by NoobComputerBuild.com. Here you see in front of you 3 different builds separated by 3 different budgets, or 4 different budgets depending on how you look at the first build here. So the first one here is a $1,500 build or a $1,300 build, which is dependent specifically on exact one piece of hardware, which is specifically the graphics card. The mid-range build here is the $1,000 gaming PC build, and then the last one you see here is a $600 gaming PC build. So starting off, which build is right for you will be completely dependent upon 1, your budget, how much do you have to spend, and then 2, your performance expectations. And so what those will be dependent on are what games do you play, and how do you want them to perform at certain resolutions. And then one thing to note is that there have been some releases throughout the month, in the last month or so, which include Ryzen CPUs, AMD CPUs. They are not included in these builds because after looking at the benchmarks that did come out, I decided that they're not probably the best for gaming specific builds, but they would be great for a hybrid gaming workstation build, as the Ryzen 5 CPUs don't perform quite as well as the Intel i5s yet. But I'll be doing a build on that soon, so if you are interested in that, but keep in mind that these are gaming specific builds and will maximize your performance in games. Alright, getting started. We have all these builds side by side, so it's easy to see how they compare. So starting with the first one here, the $1,500 or $1,300 build, we have the processor Intel Core i5-7600K to $2,999. The mid-range one is a i5-7600K as well, and then the difference between those two and the $600 build is this has an Intel Core 7100 i3. So the first 2 CPUs here are unlocked, so you can overclock them quite easily, whereas you cannot. This one's locked here, so the 7100 i3, so you cannot overclock this one. And so we have a cooler included with an air cooler included with the first 2 builds. So a Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo, $24.99. That's because there is no cooler included with the 7600K, but there is a stock cooler included with the i3, which will be just fine, as you probably don't need more cooling since you can't overclock anyway. So excess heat won't be created. For the motherboard for the first build here, we have the ASRock Z270 Killer. This is new, not new for this build, as we changed it up from the one from last month. This is $169.99. The motherboard that we have for the $1,000 build is the MSI Pro Series Intel Z270 SLI Plus, motherboard, $132.49. And then the motherboard that we have for the $600 build is MSI Pro Series H270 board for $105.99. And now next we have is the graphics card. This is the real performance driver behind these builds, and one of the newer pieces of hardware in the latter 2 builds that you see here. So like I said before, what makes this a $1,300 versus a $1,500 build is whether you choose the GTX 1080, which is $489.99, or GTX 1070, which is $387.98. So difference between the two is that they both perform really well in resolutions as high as 1440p going into 4K. But if you are leaning a little more towards 4K, the 1080 would perform better. Also VR, keep that in mind if you want to do VR. The best bang for your buck for that would be the 1080, but overall the best bang for your buck in terms of just gaming, I would suggest just the GTX 1070. And now for the $1,000 build, this is a newer AMD RX card, the RX 588GB card, $249.99. That replaces the previous 480, and it performs slightly better. And now the graphics card for the $600 build, we have the MSI RX 570. Which it replaces the 470, and this is the 4GB card for $174.99, and it does perform a little better. So I'll just jump over to some quick benchmarks on a couple sites. So this is Hardware Canucks, and this is Tom's Hardware, just to give you a quick idea of how these graphics cards change the performance of your build. So at 2K settings, or 1440p in Battlefield 1, you can see the GTX 1070 here, which is the one included in the first build, and then the RX 580 right below it, which you can see the 1070 performs a little bit better in Battlefield 1 at 1440p than the 580. And then if you look over to Tom's Hardware, this is the 1080p results, but same thing. their benchmarks kind of line up around the same numbers. But so if we scroll, actually, I'll jump over to Battlefield 1 1080p. We'll scroll down here. So here we have the 580 gets 90 FPS. They're getting 89 FPS in Battlefield 1 at 1080p. So the benchmarks do match up, and the 580 does perform a little better than the previous 480 by a little bit. And the 570 included in the $600 build is here. You can see it still performs quite well, actually, at 1080p. It's 75 FPS, so if you get above 60, I think it is usually the baseline that we'll use for really good performance. 75 FPS is still really good. So keep in mind that the $600 build is still a great bang for your buck. All right, so that aside, the rest of the build, for the high-end build, we have 16 gigs of RAM. Here, the Corsair Vengeance LPX 16 gigabyte kit, $126.99. And then for the latter two builds, we have an 8 gigabyte kit, Ballistic Sport LT, $64. And then for storage, for the first build, we have a 500 gigabyte Samsung 850 EVO, $174.73. For the $1,000 build, we have an SK Hynix SSD, 250 gigabyte for $96.70. And then for the $600 build, we have the same brand of SSD, but the 120 gigabyte version for $56.41. Keep in mind that's not a ton of storage, but it will install your OS just fine in a few games. If you want to upgrade right away, you could, like you see here, just bump it up to a 250 or a 500 gigabyte version for a little more money. Now the power supplies, we have a 750 watt EVGA Supernova G2 for the $1,300, $1,500 build hybrid for $99.99. For the $1,000 build, we have an EVGA Supernova 650 G1, $79.74, and then Corsair CX Series 5 CX500 500 watt power supply for $58.87 for the $600 build. And now to finish these builds off, we have a case to enclose all of the hardware. And so in the first build, the high-end build, we have a Be Quiet. This is actually a new case. Just released by Be Quiet. It's a Be Quiet Pure Base 600 with the window. It's the orange version. I forget what the other colors are, but this is the orange one profiled here for $98.99. And then for the $1,000 build, we have, this isn't a new case, but it is it's a quality case. It's been around for a while and it's really well reviewed. I like it. The Roswell Gaming Nighthawk 117, $83.99. And then for the $600 build, we have an affordable Deepcool TX Tesseract SW 4099. I do have some upgrade suggestions if you do have more to spend now or in the future. If you want upgrade suggestions for the future, that's cool too. So for the high-end build, you could upgrade to a Intel i7 if you 7700K, which would, you just plop that in, just get that instead of the 7600K for $339.99. And that would be if you do more than gaming. You do media work or graphics work. This might help you out there. And this is a new graphics card as well. It replaces the previous Titan X, which was crazy over $1,000 graphics card. But if you're serious about 4K gaming, this is a great price, especially compared to the previous Titan X, the EVGA GeForce GTX 1080 Ti, $699.99. And then two other suggestions: you can get a PCIe SSD. It's faster, but more expensive, such as this Plextor MAPE 512 gigabyte SSD, $229.99. Or you want a cooler upgrade? This is a liquid CPU cooler, Corsair Hydro Series H100 V2, $119.99. So now let's move over to the $1,000 build upgrades. Like I said, you can bump up the storage capacity to a Samsung 850 EVO 500 gigabyte, or the one driver, or the one thing that would increase your performance right away would be to bump up the graphics card to a EVGA GeForce GTX 1070 SC. A power supply upgrade, and what I mean by that is that this is an EVGA Supernova 650p2, which is a platinum rated power supply, so it's more energy efficient in terms of its power usage. We have a Corsair Hydro Series H80i V2 liquid CPU cooler if you want to bump up those cooling temperature, or not bump up the temperatures, bump them down a little bit of a customized cooling experience, $84.99. And then for the $600 build, if you do want slightly better cooling, you know the Cooler Master Hyper 212 is also compatible with this build. You can bump up to an RX 580 graphics card, $249.99. If you want an i5 CPU, you can bump that up for only $199.89. or like I said, 120 gigabytes included in the build above. Not a ton of space, so you could bump that up to the 250 gigabyte version for $96.70. All right, that does it for this month's builds. Please leave a comment if you have any questions or just want to say hi. Also, visit the site if you have any questions and want to say hi, noobcomputerbuild.com, where you can read more into these builds, where I explain a little more as to why I chose the hardware and so on and so forth. But until next month, best of luck building.